Good evening and welcome to another edition of Down to the Wire. I'm your host, Derbyologist, and joining me again is Capping with Candace. And with so many prep races, we decided to take an extra kind of an in-depth dive into the Kentucky Derby Triple Crown season, as we'd like to do this once a month, and this one kind of as we start going into the month of February. Candace, a nice weekend, and let's kind of start the show here with the buzz of the social media world. Top Billing's big win yesterday.
Top Billing, we talked about him in our last video. He was on the undercard for the Holy Bull. He's by Curlin out of an AP Indy mare. And we kind of said before that we thought it was maybe between him and Surfing USA, and it turned out that that was the case. Surfing USA was on the lead all the way till they entered the stretch, and Top Billing just kind of took over. It looked pretty easy. Didn't seem to be challenged too much. Yeah, I mean, it was good. Good performance for sure.
A nice race, I think, from both of them. The fractions were pretty solid for Surfing USA, 111, 136. At the end of the day, they were 3/5 of a second slower than the Holy Bull, and the Holy Bull had more experienced runners. So I think Top Billing definitely fits into the mix, especially among the Gulfstream Tampa Bay horses. Who are some of the horses that you're following down in Tampa Bay and Gulfstream that maybe aren't getting a lot of the publicity?
I think for me, a big one, and maybe because he's been away for a little while, but I'm really looking forward to Harpoon. I think he's going to be prepping to go to the Tampa Bay Derby. He's by Tappet, but he's been really nice. As he raced 4 times as a 2-year-old. He lost to Cairo Prince, who we talked about. Ended up winning the Holy Bull. A couple really nice horses before breaking his maiden, and he's a little bit different than some of the other Tappets. He seems like he has a little more of an ability to rate. He's a smaller built horse, which for the Tappets I think is what you want to see. We don't really want to see the big horses that are real lanky and kind of have trouble staying sound. So I think he's prepping for Tampa, and he's one that I'm looking forward to.
Yes, I think he's going to be running next week in the Sam F. Davis, so we might get a chance to kind of take the covers under him, especially after that 8-length win in the last race. Mm-hmm. Right now, here's some of the horses that people are talking about in Florida. Honor Code, Cairo Prince, Top Billing, Commissioner, and Constitution. Mm-hmm. Some top talent there.
Definitely. Have to be a little concerned about Honor Code. He's missed some works recently. Cairo Prince we saw in the Holy Bull had no problems. Constitution we've seen 4-2. He was kind of a buzz horse after he broke his maiden in his first start. So lots of talent. I think Florida might be the most talented section right now.
One of the questions that seems to be coming up a lot in this Triple Crown campaign is the workouts. Shared Belief, a lot of talk about him missing a couple of weeks of workouts. Honor Code really with just one slow workout, and then it's been 8 days since he's had another one. And no works on the tab yet for Havana. What does that do for their chances as we start getting closer to February?
You have to think it makes it really tough. I'm never a fan of when a horse has a plan and then the plan gets changed. We saw it not with the 3-year-olds last year, but we saw it even with Princess of Silmar heading to the Breeders' Cup when that wasn't the original plan and it didn't work out. And that's just something I'm never a fan of. With horses, especially this young, I get concerned. You don't want to ever see them rushed and have something go wrong. Shared Belief in particular is one that's really concerning for me. I think maybe they wanted a 3-race campaign, and it's definitely going to be 2 now. So that's tough.
Yes, with Shared Belief, I mean, he's undefeated. He ended up getting the 2-year-old championship, and initially they said the Lewis, and now they've already said the San Felipe. It could work out to his advantage because with 3 races as a 2-year-old, he does have that little bit of a slack that if they can prime him up for the San Felipe, it means that the Derby would be his 3rd race off a layoff, which is not a bad pattern. So I think Shared Belief, I think the key for him is that if he can get on the work tab, really he's got about another week. If they rest him up for another week, if he's not on the work tab by a week from today, maybe February 2nd, February 3rd, then even the San Felipe, because normally it takes 4 weeks to really prime up a horse, sometimes 5 weeks. He was in shape. He did have the 3 races pretty quickly, so it's not like they're starting from ground zero. And he did run in December versus horses like Honor Code and Havana. They've been off since early November.
Mm-hmm.
One other big question this year, what about the Poly Road to the Derby? There's traditionally some turf horses over the last few years, and one of those horses is specifically being talked about. Bobby's Kitten is basically going to have one turf prep and then the bluegrass, and then Ken Ramsey wants his kitten in the Derby.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to really take what we see on the all-weather tracks and kind of translate it over to the dirt. I think for those races, you really have to take it on a case-by-case basis with the horses themselves. I mean, we've seen horses transition. We've seen, your Animal Kingdoms or your Barbaros who've made that successful transition, but those seem to be more the exception than the rule. As far as Bobby's Kitten, he's one that I personally am excited about, though. He's worked over the dirt before, and I've heard really good things about him running on the dirt in his workouts. And, him in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf, I think he was by far the most impressive in there. And I think the World of Outstrip, I think one thing with these races, when you see these Euros come over on the turf, is people don't always realize how good those horses are, like where they stand back home. We see a horse like Dank, who wasn't really much of anything back home, but we think of her as a monster here. Whereas Outstrip, who won the juvenile turf, he's a bona fide Group 1 horse over there. So for Bobby's Kitten to hold on and be as relatively close as he was, considering the hot pace in that race, that was very, very impressive to me. And like you said, they want to put him on the turf and then the poly before hopefully getting him in the Derby. And I think that's a nice gradual transition. There's a lot to like about him. If he keeps his front-running style, I think that also is a little better, or at least alleviates concerns of mine as far as kickback. So, with these all-weather races leading to the Derby, I just think you really have to go on a horse-by-horse basis.
Another horse that's considering the turf to all-weather to the Derby angle is a horse that came back on Friday called Dance with Fate. He won the turf prep, and they've kind of said they'd like to go to the El Camino Real, and then they would like to go to the Bluegrass and then to the Derby. He's been a stone-cold closer, and the last couple of years, the El Camino Real has been a couple of scat daddies that went from Santa Anita down to Golden Gate, and it looks like Dance with Fate kind of fits that pattern. So it'll be interesting with him. And I know another horse that you're looking forward to, Medal Count, might try that same route, turf to poly to dirt.
Mm-hmm.
Well, a couple of disappointing efforts this weekend I wanted to talk about. Give me your thoughts. A lot of hype on these two horses. One, Unknown Road, and the second one, Wicked Strong. What happened to them this week? And they kind of typify that a horse's stock can go up and down quickly on the Derby trail.
Unknown Road and Wicked Strong, you said they were both really disappointing. Both of them were weird in that, you couldn't look in there, you couldn't see trip troubles, you couldn't see anything. They just pretty much didn't fire. It's tough. With these 3-year-old races, it's tough because they're also, their form is also dependent on each other, but at the same time, most of them are relatively unexposed. So you see like Unknown Road maybe was boosted a little bit by the form of Coup de Gras, but then ended up neither of them did much. So then it's like that whole form's gone. There's really not much to say other than both of them they didn't have anything that day.
I was impressed by a winner today at Santa Anita by the name of Chelios. Tom Proctor won 3 races, and this horse has an interesting pedigree for those of us who really like to dive into the pedigrees, which I do. Distorted Humor, who goes for near $100,000 as a stallion fee. He's been atop the leaderboard in the top 10 for the last few years, and he's also won the sire title. He's already sired a Derby winner in Funny Side, but Chelios made his second lifetime start and ran impressive fractions on the front end, 22, 44 and change, 109 and change, 116 and 3. He's out of an AP mare. Again, just 2 lifetime starts, but will we possibly see him go into a stakes race next? And what were some of your thoughts about him today?
He blew my mind. Like, there hasn't been a 3-year-old who had really, really impressed me with one run this year. Like, a lot of them I like just because I see progression. He absolutely blew me away today. The fact that he was able to break as quickly from the gate as he did, and to hold on off of the really fast fractions he was setting, he was challenged and he just put the challenge away. There was a lot to like about him there. I thought after the race, I watched him, prancing around the winner's circle. I thought he was gorgeous, just really lanky, kind of. Just loved his build. I loved everything about him that I saw today. He absolutely soared into my top 10, and I'm really looking forward to seeing him coming up. He's a half to old-time hockey, so that gives me a little hope about him stretching out to a route.
I think you're a bigger fan than I am. I really liked his performance today. I'm definitely a fan of his pedigree, and this is the type of horse that, a lot of time people are impressed with closers, but a horse that can run on the lead or near the lead, I don't think he's a front runner. His first race, he closed, and I think today was just Gary Stevens saying, we're going to break your maiden today because we got bigger and better things to move on to, and he really just stole the race, but that horse was a little bit rank, and anytime when I'm looking for potential really good horses, the good horses like Sunday Silence, Winning Colors, Ali Sheba, Bet Twice, even some other ones throughout the years, they have a strong engine. They can run within 2-3 lengths of the pace. Cigar, closers, they're all, like Strike the Gold and Orb and other horses, they're always dependent on pace and they're always dependent on a good trip. So a nice win. Some other contenders kind of lying in the weeds. A horse that I'm excited to see in a couple of weeks is Cool Samurai. He's going to be running in the Lewis, I think. And, he chased, he beat Wicked Strong in his he had a nice race on the East Coast, and then he came back and beat a horse barely breaking his maiden. But he's had some nice long workouts, and I think he's just a proven router. Is there anybody out there that's kind of moving into the stakes race in that next series, either the Risen Star, the Lewis, or you mentioned Harpoon, but maybe the Fountain of Youth that is kind of maybe a little under the radar for you?
Maybe before I get to that, Cool Samurai, I think I have an absolutely opposite opinion of you on him.
Okay.
I really don't like him all that much. In his last race, he absolutely benefited completely from a speed duel that happened up front. I don't remember who the other horse was, but it was with the Admiral, who is no good either. So he still has a lot to prove to me. As far as other horses, you mentioned Dance with Fate. He's one who's intriguing to me. I had him in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. I really liked what he did down in Del Mar last year, so I'm excited to see him in the El Camino Real. In the Southwest, I think, maybe seeing Coastline one more time, if he goes there, is going to be interesting. We talked about him a little bit last week, finished third. So he's one that I think I'm looking forward to as well. General A-Rod. Conquest Titan beat him at Churchill last time out, and Conquest Titan ran what I thought was a really, really nice race in the Holy Bull. So General A-Rod's one that, some of these horses, I just kind of want to see what some of them do to, even prove the form of some of the others who they've most recently ran against. And so those are ones I'm looking forward to. Vickers in Trouble we'll see again in the Risen Star. So some nice horses coming up for sure.
The strength of the division still seems to be at Gulfstream. There's a few other horses that are going to be cranking up for, really, we've got next week the Hutchinson, and then you've got a couple of nice races at Tampa Bay. Manhattan Johnny, he's a sprinter. He also seems to like the slop. Noble Cornerstone, I think people are kind of forgetting about him. He's a New York bred, but he's got a kind of a middle distance pedigree. They're considering either the Risen Star or Tampa Bay possibly with him. Another horse I was impressed with a maiden victory was Tonalist. I think people kind of overlooked this horse. He didn't look as flashy as some of the other Tapit winners, but I like the strong energy burst that he made right near the finish line, and now he's ran 2 route races, both with a finishing move. He ran evenly in the first race. He had 1 prep as a 2-year-old. I'm still a firm believer until a horse wins the Derby with no races as a 2-year-old, it's not going to happen. I'm not a big believer in all these 3-year-old maiden winners. Until they actually win the Derby, I'm going with the Curse of Apollo. I do think there's a reason why horses like Top Billing, they purposely ran that horse in December because Shug McGahee knows he didn't want to go into the 3-year-old season not having raced. I think there's a couple other horses that raced near the end of December purposely to get 1 race under their belt. So I'm a big believer in that a horse needs a race as a 2-year-old. So until that's kind of broken, Gold Hawk, he could maybe improve. I think the last race he was forced up onto a faster pace, and I think now they'll go back to his closing tactics. Another horse that will be running in the Risen Star that I like is Commanding Curve. He ran second to Gold Hawk, and he's a stone cold closer. He made a nice mid-race move, took the lead in that Gold Hawk race, and then got outrun. Been working 6 furlong workouts. I think he's a nice horse. He's going to have to improve quickly, but they've pretty much said right after that race they're going to go down to the fairgrounds, and they're going to run Risen Star, and they're going to run Louisiana Derby, and they want to peak the first Saturday in May. So they're kind of just letting everybody run themselves out in January, and they're waiting until February and March.
And in the Southwest, too, I almost forgot, I think we're supposed to see the return of Strong Mandate, right? Who, last time we saw him was as a 2-year-old, and he ran a bang-up race from the outside post going to the front in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. So I think some of these horses who we saw in the Juvenile have kind of been forgotten about because we haven't seen them since, but he's a very talented horse who could easily win the Southwest.
Yeah, Strong Mandate is one of the few horses with a speed rating over 100, and we were kind of talking, lamenting, we're still kind of wondering about who the possible pace setters are. Last year we had an unusual pace with Palace Malice getting the blinkers on and doing the 45-3. But Strong Mandate, people forget, he did 109 in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, and he threw down an impressive fractions in the slop out on the East Coast. So Strong Mandate been working regularly at Oaklawn Park, and Wayne Lucas said all along it'd be Southwest, Rebel, or Arkansas Derby, or maybe just 2 of the 3. So he's definitely one of those pace horses that is sitting on the sidelines. Before we wrap it up here, talk about a horse maybe, I don't want to say overrated, but until he actually gets a speed figure or a performance that kind of matches up with some of the other horses that are in your top 10, is there anybody that says, that you're still saying needs to prove it for you?
For me, it's Honor Code. I mean, people look at him like he's the second coming of Secretariat. And in the races he's run thus far, other than his maiden win, which was over the slop and was ridiculous, and I'm sure most of us, if not all of us, have seen it by now. And if you haven't, take a look. It was at Saratoga. Other than that, he ran in the Champagne, and in that race, I'm a firm believer that Havana ran a much better race than him, considering the pace. It was a quick pace, and Havana was on the front the entire time. It was a perfect pace setup for Honor Code, and he couldn't get it done there. And then he ran against Cairo Prince in the Remsen. We dissected that race, inside and out. But I, like I said last week, I really thought that Cairo Prince was the better of those 2 horses in that race. I think Honor Code, people look at him and they're projecting forward. They think he's great because they see his pedigree and they think he's, bred to be a Derby horse. But as far as the performances he's had, I don't think they've anywhere come near, the expectations that we all have for him.
One of the horses that I'm going to make kind of show it to me is Mexicoma. He had a big win at Delaware, and then he was privately purchased, and he ran in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. And a lot of people, equate that with that he belonged and he ran this great race in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. I just saw kind of a plodding closer. Didn't really do much for me. Now he's been working steadily down at Gulfstream. So I think that horse is on many people's top 20 list. He was, and I just want to see him run a 90 speed figure before I'm diving into the Mexicoma bandwagon, I guess. So Mexicoma is a horse that until he actually, throws in a top 10 or 12 performance, he's going to remain on the fringe of contendership for me, I guess. So that's a horse that I'm kind of going to make prove it to me. Kind of some interesting developments this weekend. Now we get closer to February. I think what people don't realize is there'll still be a few more horses that are coming, without any workouts. But really, if they don't start working out in the next week here, horses like Matterhorn, he's got just 1 workout, and need to see a regular work pattern from Honor Code. Shared Belief, they pretty much said he's going to be out for another week. So that's going to be an important development. Next week we've got the Withers and then the Lewis. And then that kind of starts that second round, and then we go into the bigger pointers. So any other final thoughts here as we go into the month of February that you're going to be looking at?
For me, I think I'm just want to see, the horses we've seen perform so far. I want to see if they're progressing. I'm interested in some of the horses who we haven't seen in a while, or some who've maybe been off the work tab for a little while. One that really interests me is In Trouble, who's recently come back onto the work tab. He was fantastic as a 2-year-old. his maiden race, there was a ton of next time out winners in there. So, some of the horses like him who maybe had some hiccups at the end of their juvenile season, who, are getting things together and coming back, right around now. I'm interested in that.
Great. That's going to do it for our first Derby Roundtable, the end of January edition. We'll do this again in a month. It kind of gives us a chance to look at some of the contenders and kind of take a bigger scope view of the Triple Crown contenders rather than dissecting an individual race or a couple of horses. So make sure to join us next week for Down to the Wire. We will be previewing the Withers Stakes and the Sam F. Davis down at Tampa Bay for another edition, Kentucky Derby Roundtable style here on Down to the Wire.